Picture this. It's late November, 1958. The Illinois sky is the color of a bruised plum, and the wind is whipping around the corner of the porch, rattling the storm windows. You're 8 years old, face pressed against the cold condensation of the front glass, waiting for the mail carrier's truck to crest the hill. He isn't bringing bills, postcards, or letters from relatives today. He's bringing the promise of Christmas. When he finally trudges up the walk, he's lugging a brick of paper so dense it strains his shoulder. He drops it on the doormat with a heavy muted thud that vibrates through the floorboards. That sound wasn't just mail delivery, it was the starting gun for the holiday season. But before this book became a childhood ritual of circling toys in a suburban living room, it was something far more critical. For millions of Americans in the darker, quieter corners of the early 20th century, this wasn't just a wish book, it was a survival manual, a hardware store, and a window into a world they would otherwise never see. To understand the sheer gravity of that thud on the porch, we have to rewind the tape back to a time before the interstate highway system, before the shopping mall, and certainly before the internet. In 1905, if you lived on a farm in Kansas or a dusty homestead in the Dakotas, your world was only as big as the distance a horse could travel in a day. You were at the mercy of the local general store owner. He decided what was on the shelves, and he decided what you paid for it. If he charged 50 cents for a tin of coffee that should have cost 10, you paid it or you went without. Then came Richard Sears and Alva Roebuck. They didn't just create a catalog, they built the Amazon of the steam-powered era. When that massive tome arrived in the mailbox, often over 500 pages of thin, flimsy newsprint, it broke the monopoly of the local merchant. It was a chaotic, beautiful mess of commerce. You could open the 1908 edition and find a bewildering inventory that mapped the entire human experience. On page 20, you might find Dr. Hammond's nerve and brain tablets for the weary farmer. On page 115, a pump organ for the parlor. And on page 800, a literal tombstone for $18.50, engraved and shipped via rail. The book itself had a smell, a mix of cheap acidic paper, petroleum-based ink, and the dust of the railway car it traveled in. It was dense and utilitarian. In the outhouses of rural America, old editions served a very different, unglamorous purpose once the new one arrived, creating a cycle where the catalog was quite literally a fundamental part of daily life from start to finish. But the most staggering proof of the catalog's power wasn't the patent medicine or the Sunday suits. It was the fact that you could mail order a home, not a dollhouse, but a real two-story structure to keep the rain off your family. Between 1908 and 1940, Sears sold upwards of 70,000 modern homes. You would select your dream from the grainy illustrations, perhaps the Magnolia, a grand colonial revival for nearly $6,000, or the humble Winona for under $750. Weeks later, a boxcar would pull into the nearest railway depot. Inside was a logistical miracle, 10,000 to 30,000 individual pieces. Pre-cut lumber, numbered to match the blueprints like a giant jigsaw puzzle. Kegs of nails, buckets of paint, varnish, roof shingles, and even the doorbell. A family with basic carpentry skills and a lot of grit could assemble their American dream in a few months. Today, you can still find these houses standing in older neighborhoods, their bones shipped by rail, ordered from the same book used to buy long johns and cast iron skillets. As the century turned the corner and the roaring 20s crashed into the Depression and eventually the post-war boom, the catalog evolved. The sepia-toned drawings of plows and cream separators began to share space with the glossy Technicolor promises of the atomic age. The Wish Book, a name officially coined by Sears in 1933, began to gain weight. By the 1960s, the arrival of the Christmas catalog was a sensory event. It was no longer just about rural survival, it was about suburban desire. The book was a behemoth, sometimes inching toward 800 pages. It was heavy enough to use as a doorstop or a booster seat for a toddler at the dinner table. The cover usually featured a Norman Rockwell-esque tableau, rosy-cheeked children, a golden retriever, and a glowing tree. Inside, the pages were a riot of changing times. You could see the cultural shifts of America just by flipping through the fashion section. The stiff wool coats of the 40s gave way to the polyester leisure suits of the 70s. You could smell the ozone of the new electronic era rising from the pages advertising color televisions in massive wooden consoles. But for the parents, the arrival of the book meant budgeting. It meant sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad, calculating if they could afford the new Kenmore washer or if the old wringer would have to last another year. They looked at the practical pages, the tools, the linens, the tires. However, once the adults were done with the practicalities, The book was abandoned on the coffee table, and that is when the real magic began. The sun would go down, the streetlights would buzz to life, and the heavy book would be dragged onto the shag carpet. The spine was about to be cracked, and the red pens were about to come out. If the front porch was the stage where the catalog made its entrance, the living room floor was the theater where the drama played out. It is the quintessential memory of a mid-century childhood, the tactile sensation of deep pile shag carpet scratching your elbows, the hum of the vacuum tubes in the television set warming up, and the smell of fresh ink wafting up from the open book. For a child in 1972 or 1985, the Sears Wish Book wasn't just a catalog, it was a menu for the future. But there was a ritual to it, a strict protocol that every kid seemed to know instinctively. You didn't just browse, you curated. You needed a strategy. Usually this involved a red felt tip pen or a chewed up ballpoint. You would start at the back, where the toys were, bypassing the endless pages of polyester slacks, corduroy blazers, and husky fit jeans that your mother was inevitably going to buy you anyway. The pages in the toy section were different. They were thinner, glossier, and crowded with color. This was the internet before the internet, but the user interface was paper, and the loading time was however fast you could flip the page. There was a hierarchy to the circling. A single circle meant, "I'd like this." A circle with an arrow meant, "I really want this." And if you folded the corner of the page down, dog-earing it so severely that the paper cracked, and left the book open on the coffee table for your parents to accidentally find, that was a declaration of desperate need. The curation was eclectic, bordering on the absurd. Because Sears sold everything, the juxtaposition on the pages was a chaotic fever dream. In the 1970s editions, you could turn a page featuring innocent Holly Hobby ovens and Sesame Street plushies and land immediately on a spread selling genuine air rifles and hunting bows. A young boy could circle a pack of Fruit of the Loom underwear on the left page and a 12-gauge shotgun on the right. It was a lawless, unfiltered marketplace where safety concerns hadn't yet sanitized the shopping experience. And then there were the big dreams. Every kid had one item they circled every year, knowing deep down it would never, ever show up under the tree. This was the era of the motorized go-kart. In the catalog, the illustration showed a kid with windswept hair, tearing around a track in a machine that looked like a miniature Formula One car, complete with a Briggs & Stratton engine. The price might have been $129.99, an astronomical sum in 1978, roughly equivalent to $600 today. You stared at that picture until you could smell the two-stroke exhaust. You imagined the freedom of peeling out of your driveway, leaving the Schwinn bicycle in the dust, or perhaps it was the elaborate electric train sets, specifically the ones that spanned 2 full pages. The catalog photos showed them set up in pristine, snow-covered villages with working streetlights and tiny pedestrians. They sold you a world, not just a toy. Of course, if you actually got the set, you quickly realized the track was finicky, the connections were loose, and the snow was just painted plastic. But the catalog didn't sell reality. It sold the potential of a perfect Christmas morning. This ritual taught an entire generation the agonizing art of patience. Unlike the buy now button of today, where dopamine is delivered in 2 days or less, the Sears order was a test of endurance. Once the order form was filled out, in your mother's cursive handwriting, and mailed with a check, the silence set in. Allow 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. 6 to 8 weeks. That is an eternity in the life of a child. It meant that by the time the box arrived, the snow might have already melted. The anticipation built a specific kind of character. You had to sustain the excitement purely on imagination. You checked the mail every day, not for the item, but for the notification that the package was waiting at the local catalog counter. The decline of this paper empire wasn't sudden. It was a slow fade, like a photograph left in the sun. As the 80s turned into the 90s, the Wish Book got thinner. The big box stores like Toys R Us began to offer instant gratification. You could walk in, touch the toy, and take it home. The magic of the wait began to erode. Then came the digital revolution. The internet didn't just kill the catalog, it dismantled the entire experience of shared dreaming. When you shopped on a screen, it became a solitary act. There was no physical book to fight over with your siblings. There were no dog-eared pages to signal your hopes. The infinite scroll of Amazon replaced the curated density of Sears. We gained efficiency, certainly. We gained the ability to compare prices and read reviews and track packages within an inch of their lives. But we lost the sensory weight of the season. We lost the smell of the ink. We lost the distinct heavy thud on the porch that told us, without a word being spoken, that it was time to start believing in magic again. The Wish Book was a physical anchor, in a year that was often turbulent. It was a promise that no matter how hard the year had been, there was still a page full of bright, impossible things waiting to be circled. In 1993, Sears discontinued the Big Book General Catalog, though the holiday Wish Book limped on for a few more years in smaller forms. We traded the romance of the mail order era for the ruthless efficiency of the algorithm. We no longer have to wait 6 weeks for a package, and we no longer have to guess what a product looks like from a grainy sketch. But in gaining the world at our fingertips, we lost the collective heartbeat of the holiday season. We lost the shared text of a generation. The Wish Book wasn't just a store, it was the paper and ink proof that for a few weeks in December, dreaming was free.